I learned the hard way that there are two things you never mess with in a quiet American neighborhood: another person's property and anything that even smells like federal infrastructure. I didn't know that yet, of course. Back then, I thought the worst thing that could happen on my block was another passive-aggressive note about trash cans or lawn height. I was wrong. So spectacularly wrong that for one long day, my driveway turned into a parking lot for government sedans, and my nosy HOA president learned what it feels like when the clipboard stops protecting you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When I bought my house, it wasn't much to look at. A narrow place on Alder Ridge Lane, creaky porch steps, paint that had seen better decades, and a stubborn old sycamore tree out front that dropped leaves like it was personally offended by autumn. I loved it anyway. It was mine, quiet, affordable, and most importantly, it came with access to a newly installed fiber line that ran clean and fast straight through our alley. That last part mattered more than anyone around me realized. I worked remotely as a systems analyst for a large aerospace subcontractor. Nothing sexy, no Mises, no spy stuff. Mostly long days staring at code, monitoring system performance, making sure nothing that shouldn't blink ever blinked. It was boring, high-responsibility work, the kind where latency isn't just annoying, it's a problem. Internet wasn't a luxury for me. It was how I paid the mortgage, how I kept health insurance, how I stayed employed. So I invested in it. I ran clean conduit from the pole to the garage, installed a tidy patch panel, labeled everything like a paranoid librarian, and bought a modem that could handle ridiculous loads without breaking sweat. The setup was quiet, invisible, professional. If you didn't know what you were looking at, you'd never notice it. Unfortunately, someone did. Her name wasn't actually Karen, obviously, but if the shoe fits, I'll call her Linda. Linda lived 3 houses down, corner lot, immaculate lawn, flags changed with the seasons, and a presence that somehow managed to fill the street without her ever raising her voice. She was the HOA president, which in our neighborhood meant she had a clipboard, a neighborhood app account, and a deep, spiritual belief that order was fragile and only she was holding it together. She noticed everything. Trash cans out 15 minutes too early. A fence post leaning half an inch off vertical. A wind chime that made noise after 8 p.m. Linda didn't yell. She documented. She smiled. She filed. And then one day, she noticed my roof. Not the house itself, just the little antenna that poked up like a shy metal finger near the back ridge. It wasn't even flashy, just part of my internal network. Still, the first message came through the app that night. Friendly reminder that rooftop installations require HOA approval. I replied politely, explained it wasn't visible from the street, not an installation in the traditional sense, not even new. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji that somehow felt like a threat. From that point on, she hovered. She asked about cables she didn't understand, complained about utility workers who weren't even there for me, once accused me of installing a satellite dish I didn't own. Each interaction was cordial on the surface, but there was an edge underneath, like she'd decided I was a problem that just hadn't revealed its violation yet. Then came the Monday morning everything went quiet. I got home from a short grocery run and felt it immediately, that wrong kind of silence. No doorbell chime when I walked in. No soft hum from the fridge. No little notification from my phone syncing with the house. I checked the router. Dark. Modem. Dead. My phone refused to load even a single page. At first I assumed an outage. It happens. So I grabbed a hoodie and walked around back to the alley where the junction box sat. The sky was clear. No storm. No wind damage. Everything looked normal until it didn't. The line running from the pole down to my ground box was gone. Not frayed. Not torn. Cleanly cut. Surgical. Like someone had taken their time and made sure it wouldn't reconnect by accident. My stomach dropped. I called the provider. They confirmed the neighborhood was fine. No outie. Just me. They promised a crew in the morning and offered a temporary hotspot that barely loaded email. I thanked them, hung up, and stood there staring at the cut cable like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. That's when I heard footsteps on the porch. Linda stood there, posture perfect, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. She looked past me at the cable and made a little noise of disapproval. "You should really be more careful about how your wires run," she said calmly. "It looks messy." Hier. Did you cut my cable? I asked. She smiled. Just slightly. I wouldn't touch private property, she said. I found it like that. I've already reported it. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a broken internet line anymore. This was a line someone shouldn't have crossed. I stood there for a second after she left, just listening to the porch boards settle back into place, trying to decide whether I was angry or just stunned, because there's a special kind of whiplash that comes from realizing a neighbor might have crossed from annoying into unhinged while smiling at you the whole time. I didn't chase her, didn't argue, didn't even say anything clever. I just took photos, lots of them, close-ups of the cut, wide shots of the alley, timestamps, angles, the kind of documentation you learn to collect when your job trains you to assume everything will someday be reviewed by someone who doesn't know you and doesn't care how reasonable you sound. I posted a short, factual message on the neighborhood app. Nothing accusatory, just that my service line had been deliberately cut. The provider was notified, repairs scheduled, and that tampering with utility equipment was a serious issue. I hit post and put the phone down because I already knew how that app worked. Once you light the fuse you don't control with a sparks land. Within minutes, the replies started rolling in. Some neighbors were angry on my behalf. Others immediately jumped to theories about vandals or bored teenagers. One guy offered to loan me a generator like we were preparing for a siege. And then there were the quiet ones, the people who didn't comment but viewed the post twice, 3 times, the ones who knew exactly, who had a history of finding problems in other people's yards. Linda responded about 20 minutes later. She wrote that she had reported the damage to the HOA, that unsightly wiring had been a concern before, and that everyone should remain calm until the provider resolved the issue. It was written in that same polished tone she used for everything, calm, official, and just vague enough to sound helpful without actually saying anything. I didn't reply. The next morning, the provider's truck pulled up just after 8. The technician was a guy named Mark, mid-40s, sunburned neck, coffee thermos that had clearly lived a full life. He didn't even need a ladder. One look at the line, and he let out a low whistle. "That's clean," he said. "Real clean. Accidental?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He shook his head. "Nope, that's a tool cut. Someone wanted it dead." He took photos, ran tests, and then paused longer than I expected while scrolling through something on his tablet. He glanced up at me. "What do you do for work?" he asked casually. I hesitated for half a beat, then told him the truth, broad strokes, nothing classified, just enough. He nodded slowly, like a piece of a puzzle had clicked into place. "That explains why this tripped upstream alarms." I blinked. "Upstream alarms?" "Your line routes through a shared commercial exchange," he said. "Normally, a residential cut wouldn't raise eyebrows, but your circuit's flagged as priority traffic. When it went dark, it didn't just disappear quietly. I felt that cold, sinking sensation again, the one that tells you something is about to become much bigger than you planned for. He made a call, then another. He stepped a little farther away, voice low, professional, and when he came back his demeanor had changed. Straighter posture, less small talk. "They're expediting the repair," he said. "But there's going to be some questions." I didn't even have time to ask what kind before the first black sedan rolled onto the street. Then another. Then another. They parked neatly, deliberately, like they'd rehearsed it. Doors opened. People stepped out. Men and women, not flashy, not aggressive, just unmistakably official. Suits. Earpieces. The kind of presence that doesn't rush, but also doesn't waste time. My neighbors noticed immediately. Garage doors froze halfway open. A kid on a bike stopped pedaling. Curtains shifted. Linda appeared at the edge of her driveway, clipboard in hand, like it was muscle memory. One of the agents approached me, polite smile, calm voice, asked for my name and ID. Another spoke quietly with Mark. A third walked the alley, photographing the cut cable and the surrounding area. Everything was methodical, almost boring in its efficiency, which somehow made it more unsettling. Linda drifted closer. "I'm the HOA president," she announced before anyone asked. "Is there a problem?" One of the agents turned to her, smiled professionally, and asked a few routine questions. Had she noticed anything unusual? When had she first seen the damage? Had she reported it to anyone else? Her answers were quick. Too quick. Clean. Rehearsed. She said she'd discovered the cut early that morning during her routine walk. Said she'd immediately documented it. Said she had no idea how it happened, but was very concerned about neighborhood safety. I watched her while she spoke, not with anger, but with a kind of detached curiosity, because when you spend your career watching systems fail, you learn to recognize patterns, and her story had the same feeling as a log file that's been edited just a little too carefully. The agent nodded, thanked her, and then said something that changed the air on the street. "Ma'am, because this line was associated with critical communications infrastructure, we need to determine whether the damage was accidental or intentional." Linda's smile tightened. "If it was intentional," he continued, "there are federal statutes that apply." That was the first time I saw it, the flicker. Not fear exactly, but recalculation. They asked me questions next. Where I'd been the night before. Who had access to my property. Any ongoing disputes. I answered honestly, carefully handed over my photos, my timestamps, the post history from the app. One of the agents thanked me and said I'd done exactly what they would have recommended. Meanwhile, Mark and the repair crew kept running tests, and every result pointed in the same direction. Deliberate. Targeted. No collateral damage. About half an hour later, another car arrived, this one less subtle, government plates, a uniformed liaison who introduced himself with a handshake and a name that immediately fell out of my head because my brain was too busy processing the fact that my internet outage had officially become a federal matter. "We're not here to alarm anyone," he said calmly. "But when certain commercial handoffs go down, protocol requires investigation." Linda wasn't hovering anymore. She'd retreated to her driveway, arms crossed, clipboard hanging uselessly at her side. That's when the neighbor across the alley, a quiet guy named Tom, who mostly kept to himself, approached one of the agents holding his phone like it might explode. "I think I might have something," he said. Turns out Tom had a security camera pointed at his garage, motion activated, nothing fancy. He'd been reviewing footage after seeing my post, just out of curiosity. At 2:12 a.m., his camera had caught someone pacing near the utility pole, stopping, bending down, standing back up. The image wasn't perfect. Grainy. Night mode. But the posture was unmistakable. The walk. The hair pulled back. The clipboard tucked under one arm like a habit she couldn't break even in the dark. "Linda." They asked her to step aside. She tried to maintain composure, but her story began to shift under the weight of timestamps and call logs. Small inconsistencies at first. A different time. A misremembered detail. Then larger cracks. Why she'd been outside at that hour. Why she hadn't mentioned it earlier. The agents were polite. Firm. Relentless. Statements were taken. The severed cable was bagged and tagged like evidence from a crime scene. The street, which had been buzzing an hour earlier, fell into a hush that felt heavy, consequential. By noon, the repair was complete. My connection came back online, clean and fast, like nothing had ever happened. The agents gave me instructions, keep my logs, forward any documentation from my employer about the impact of the outage. They explained possible outcomes, administrative fines, restitution, criminal charges if intent was proven. Then they left. Just like that. The sedans rolled away. The street slowly exhaled. And Linda stood there, very still, watching her authority evaporate in real time. After the cars left and the street started breathing again, something subtle shifted, not just around me, but in the way people looked at each other, like everyone had collectively realized that the invisible lines we all pretend don't matter actually matter a lot. Garage doors finished opening. A lawnmower started up somewhere down the block. Kids drifted back onto the sidewalk like deer testing a clearing after a noise. Life resumed, but it didn't feel the same. Linda stayed where she was for a long moment, arms folded tight, staring at the spot where the last sedan had disappeared. The clipboard dangled from her hand like it had finally run out of purpose. No one approached her. No one defended her. That silence was louder than anything anyone could have said. By that evening, the neighborhood app was on fire. Screenshots of earlier posts resurfaced. People quoted Linda's comments back at her, the ones about unsightly wiring and community standards. Others admitted, a little sheepishly, that they'd seen her out late before, that she'd always claimed she was checking compliance or following up on reports. A few try to calm things down, reminding everyone that no charges have been filed yet, that due process mattered. But the tone had shifted. The mystique was gone. Power only works as long as people believe in it. The HOA board called an emergency meeting 2 days later. Not the usual quarterly gathering with stale cookies and complaints about fences, but a real one. Closed door at first, then open once word spread. I didn't plan to attend. I really didn't. But curiosity has a way of winning when you've been unwillingly cast in the center of something. Linda sat at the head of the table when I walked in, posture rigid, jaw clenched. The rest of the board avoided eye contact with her. There was a stack of papers in front of them, printed screenshots, timelines, the provider's incident report, and a brief letter acknowledging a federal inquiry. No conclusions. No accusations. Just facts. She spoke first, of course. She said she'd only meant to enforce the rules, that the neighborhood had been slipping, that standards mattered. She said she never intended for things to escalate, never imagined her actions would trigger something so serious. She avoided the word cut entirely, danced around it like language itself might indict her. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I explained what that connection meant to my livelihood, how it wasn't decorative, how it wasn't optional, how I tried, repeatedly, to address concerns calmly. I talked about trust, about property, about the difference between governance and control. Someone asked Linda directly if she'd touched the cable. She didn't answer right away. That pause did more damage than any confession could have. The board voted before the meeting ended. Unanimous. She was removed as HOA president pending the outcome of the investigation. No drama. No shouting. Just a quiet acknowledgement that whatever she'd thought she was protecting, she'd gone too far. She walked out without looking at anyone. Later that night, I was back in my garage, plugging a surge protector into the modem, listening to the soft, reassuring hum of systems coming back online. The lights blinked green, steady, healthy. Data flowing. Life resuming. Across the street, Linda stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, staring at my house like it was an unsolved equation. For a second, I considered staying inside, letting things end there. But something in me wanted closure, or maybe just clarity. I grabbed 2 coffees and walked over. "Do you want to explain?" I asked, holding one out. She looked at the cup like it was a trap. "I was just trying to keep order," she said finally. Her voice was quieter now, smaller. People don't realize how quickly neighborhoods fall apart. Order isn't the same as control, I said, and it definitely doesn't include cutting someone's property. She didn't argue, didn't deny it, just looked down at the sidewalk like it had betrayed her. "They won't arrest me, will they?" she asked, almost to herself. "I don't know," I said honestly. "That's not up to me." She nodded, once like she'd expected that answer. The investigation dragged on quietly after that. No dramatiquerists, no flashing lights, just paperwork, interviews, and a letter months later about restitution and fines. Enough to sting, enough to leave a record, enough that she resigned from the HOA entirely and stopped posting on the app. Some neighbors felt sorry for her. Others thought she got off easy. The block settled into a new rhythm, looser, less policed, more human. People talked again, laughed more, let things slide. As for me, my internet's never been faster. The provider rerouted my connection, added redundancy, flagged it even higher priority than before. Every time I check the logs and see that steady green heartbeat of packets flowing, I think about how fragile systems really are and how quickly small abuses of power can collide with forces far bigger than anyone expects. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with drama or speeches. Sometimes it shows up as a clipboard losing its authority, as camera timestamps, as cold procedure that doesn't care who you think you are. So I'll leave you with this. Was Linda a villain, or just someone who mistook control for responsibility? Did the response fit the crime, or did the system overreact to a neighborhood dispute? And where do we draw the line between community standards and personal boundaries? I'm genuinely curious what you think. Drop a comment. Share your take. Because somewhere out there, someone else is staring a line they think they're entitled to cross, and they might need to hear this story before they do.